Welcome back to another episode of Let's Discuss with Meg Duke, where we discuss some things perinatal and all things mental health. This week, I am so excited. I have Dr. Jackie Shoemaker Holmes here. She is a sociologist. She is the founder of Empowerment for Resilience. She is a mom. She is an academic in the wild, and this is why I love her. She is the antidote for curated motherhood bullshit. Welcome, Dr. Shoemaker Holmes.
It is such a pleasure to be here. Thank you so much, Meg.
Oh my gosh. So I always start my podcast with how do we know each other? And the answer is I'm obsessed with your Instagram and I DM'd you.
I love that. I love
yes, you
obsession.
were gracious enough to say, yes, I will sit and talk to you for an hour.
It's my
Yes. So tell me, what got you into sociology?
Oh, wow. That's a big question.
How much time do we have, right?
Yeah, I'm like, well, I've always been obsessed with the social sciences, from, my days in elementary school, high school. But I'm just really interested in people's behavior, and that sort of manifested for me once I hit university. I did a double major in anthropology and women's studies.
Amazing.
And then by the time I hit my master's, I was doing social anthropology. And by the time I hit my PhD, I was doing sociology. So I'm just obsessed with asking people questions, understanding why they do what they do, and understanding how we are shaped and shape the social world around us. So that's my best answer.
I love that. So I have to admit, I mean, of course, I had a very basic functioning understanding of what anthropology is as a result of going through school, but I was listening to Dax Shepard's podcast, Armchair Expert, and he studied anthropology at UCLA. And it's so interesting from like an anthropological viewpoint to look at some of the things, why we do the things we do, or like certain, even talking about kind of like the ADHD brain and like the hive mind, and like some bees were meant to do this and some bees were meant to do that. And like, so I just always find it so interesting where it's like the world kind of seems chaotic and twirly sometimes. And also there is a lot of reason and rationale behind the things that we do and why we do them.
I so love that you said that, because I think that it's actually a quirk of my personality that I'm a sociologist, because it's like I need to make sense of things.
Yes.
Yeah.
Right? Absolutely. So I thought I always really, I mean, Dax Shepard is podcast gold anyway, but I just always really enjoyed that part when he like mentioned some anthropological thing or the other, and I'll be like, oh wow, no, I didn't know that, thank you. So that's a very cool thing. And then that just kind of evolved as you progressed into sociology, which again, love it. So how did you decide to start Eating Her Young?
Well, Eating Her Young was really born out of I like to say it was born out of desperation.
Love it. Sure.
Because I had my daughter, and I did not expect postpartum depression, postpartum anxiety. It really wasn't on my radar. I was like one of those really obnoxious pregnant people who was like, oh, so I'm fine,
Oh.
and then I got like a little uncomfortable by the end. Do you know what I mean? It's like totally obnoxious. Yeah. And I'm a person who's used to doing things well, right? So I did pregnancy well. I was gonna do birth super well. Yep. I was gonna mom super well, completely in isolation too, because I didn't have any interest in like moms groups or talking to moms or like anything like that. I was just gonna excel because of who I am.
I got this.
Yes, totally. Mm-hmm. And so when my birth and postpartum experience was completely different than I could have imagined, right? Mm-hmm. And the spiral into postpartum depression and anxiety was so real. It took me about 2 years. My daughter was about 2.5 years old when I decided that I was going to talk publicly about my experience, right? I had gained enough clarity at that point to be able to look at the shame that I was experiencing, right? Around how I was, different, monstrous, whatever you want to say, right? Like not the appropriate mother with the appropriate feelings. And then to put that out there because I wanted at least one other person to say, yeah, that's exactly how I feel.
Yeah.
And I had experience blogging because for my dissertation, I actually studied online dating. And so I was very interested in what was called sort of like new media at the time. And so I blogged then, and for some reason I was like, I have to tell everybody about this. I can't just tell the people close to me. I need to put it on the internet. So that's what I did.
That is amazing. And oh my gosh, your dissertation was on online dating.
Yes.
Fascinating. Can we just have I don't want to make you go into it too much, but can we have just a quick rundown of kind of what was ascertained from that research?
Well, I was really interested in, so my expertise is in gender and sexuality. That's what I've always studied. And so I was particularly interested in the ways that people self online, right? So how do we create intelligible selves that are of marriageable quality, right?
Yes.
So that we can engage in this mate selection that is mediated, yes, but not really entirely different from what has come before, especially other technologically mediated ways of dating, right? I mean, all the way back to the personal ad, right?
Oh, sure.
So I was particularly interested in the gendered ways that people do that, right? So I was interested in the ways that men and women did femininity and masculinity in ways that were sort of attractive to one another. And what I found was that it was done, right? Gender was done in very conventional ways in order to secure a dateable and or marriageable partner.
Wow. Fascinating. I'm not going to make you go on about that. I could talk to you. I think we could have a whole other episode just on that. Fascinating. But yes. And so that's so great that you were able to take some of that pain that it's so tough, right? But I feel like this is a conversation I have a lot with people of like, taking the pain and the struggle and making it into something that's supporting other people in finding that community online. And sometimes too, even like the things that you didn't have, that you needed when you were going through that, you created in a way that was, accessible for others to have.
I really appreciate you saying that. Just yesterday, I participated in this conversation about sort of rural postpartum support, right? So I live in a small city in Canada, but it's essentially like it's a hub for a rural area, And so my experience was really not being able to access the kinds of things that I needed. And what I did access was really uninformed about postpartum depression and what I actually needed, right? So it's funny because in this conversation I was having about sort of what do we need in sort of rural Ontario, right? The presenter also sort of reflected that like I created something, that I needed, and absolutely I did, you know what I mean? But like I said, out of sheer desperation, right? Like because it just didn't exist. There was no one around me that was sort of experiencing what I was experiencing or speaking the truth of my experience, right? And so when I put this blog out into the universe, I did not expect so many women to say, me too, me too, me too, right? And that was really shocking for me. Like I was like, oh, this is gonna hit for like one woman and we're gonna become best friends.
You and me.
It's gonna be amazing. She's gonna read my blog like every day.
It's gonna be
great. But I just really didn't expect that. And so then that sort of snowballed into a Facebook group that I created called Mummy Voices. Again, I feel like I created that out of sheer desperation because I was in other mother groups, mom groups on
Yes.
social media, and they were fucking horrible. Do you know what I mean? Like,
I immediately, I was like, yeah, yeah, I know those groups.
they're horrible. Like, I just don't understand, right? Like, I just don't understand these like local groups
Mhm.
that it's
Mhm.
all shame and blame.
Mm-hmm. And I'm better than you. I just, if I don't want to go into a tangent, but like, I just feel like that is how we are as a society today. From, I don't know the full, origin of it, but the social media of it all, like, it's like we want to rise up on the corpses of the people we've canceled. Like, if I can show you how terrible you are, that somehow makes me a better person. And I just don't understand that energy. I like the energy of like we rise together and like how can we help each other and support. But yeah, these mom groups especially, it's like that's how people we were talking about dopamine hits before we started, which hopefully we get to that too. But it is like that's how people feel better about themselves as a parent, or they're not getting attention in some sort of way. And it's like they spend energy and time scrolling, looking for something to comment in these mommy blogs to be like, here's why you suck, and here's why you suck, and here's why I'm better than you. And it's so disheartening sometimes. So it's good to see where we get to these spaces that you are creating.
Yeah, no, I totally appreciate that. And I really feel like it's less about sort of cancellation than it is about um right, what is our proximity to
Hmm.
the heteropatriarchal standard,
Okay. Yes.
right? So it's like,
Mhm.
I will shame you for your choices because that gets me closer to power.
Speak on it. Yes, absolutely correct.
Yeah.
Absolutely
So
correct.
I think that what we're doing to each other as women in these spaces, right,
Mm-hmm.
is really just trying to put ground under our feet
Yes.
because women, so mothers are an oppressed class,
Yes.
right? Like we are an oppressed group. Yet we are told that everything that we struggle with is a personal defect,
Yes.
right? So if everything is a personal defect, then we can rip each other's throats out about it because we're not actually trained on fighting against the broader oppression.
Yes. Oh, yes. Amazing. That's exactly it. That is exactly it. And it's so interesting. I keep having these conversations, or I listen to other podcasts of other people talking about these things. And it's like genuinely we have to look inward and dismantle all of the things that we have been told all of this time about our bodies, about parenting, about the food we eat, about just everything. Everything is some sort of systemic built structure. And I hate to sound so pessimistic, but like that was meant to keep us down in some way. And so how do we dismantle that? How do we stop that natural urge to think in that way? And sometimes we don't even recognize that we're participating in some of these systems. So we don't know what we don't know.
Absolutely. And I think it's such a great question because I think that there are individual and there are collective ways of resisting.
Yes.
But those individual ways really require us to stand beside each other
Yes.
and not tear each other down,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
right? Like just fundamentally being like, you make these motherhood choices, that's great. They're not
Cool.
mine. Awesome.
Yeah.
Right. But I don't need to judge you for that. I don't need to tear you down for that. I don't need to shame you for that. Right.
Mm-hmm.
Like, let's not participate in these patriarchally oriented um, shame fests
Yes.
against one another.
Yes. Oh my gosh. Shame fest. I love that too. Wow. That is absolutely right. It is. And I like the idea too, the individual and the collective and togetherness. Absolutely. That's amazing. And so what was your experience like in that smaller Facebook group? What's it been like through the Instagram platform? I always like to ask people, I find a lot of people on social media, and I like to ask them kind of what their experience has been, having just had the conversation about sometimes people wanting to bring people down, but how has it been for you, kind of using your social media platforms?
Well, it's been totally insane, right? Like I went from this place of desperation in terms of like I have to tell my story because it's eating me up inside, right? Like I have to use this as a mechanism for healing.
Yes.
And that's what writing has always been for me, right? And so out of the sort of worst time of my life, I've created a community of amazing parents. I've written a book of poetry. I've created a business. So like, could I have anticipated any of that? Absolutely not, right? Like the way that it is unfolded is absolutely mind-blowing for me because like I said, I never anticipated that there would be so many women that were just like, thank God you're saying these things, right?
Yes.
And I didn't realize, you know, as someone who feels like an outsider to motherhood, I didn't realize what a big deal it was to say these things, you know, and now now I get that.
Yes, absolutely. It's so funny that you brought that up because that was going to be what I wanted to ask about next. Like, congratulations on your book. So huge. Love it. Tell us more about the book. I'd love to hear more about, it's called Eating Her Young, Poems for the Disruption of Motherhood. So excited I just have chills. I already know you wrote a book and I just said it out loud and got chills again. So tell us kind of what the process was like and how it's been for you.
I really appreciate that question. Again, it's kind of one of those things where I made a decision to write a poem every day. And I don't even remember like why. I was just like, I'm just going to do this, right? Like this micro practice, right? Of I'm going to write a poem every day. And so not all of the poems are about motherhood. A lot of them are about, living in my changing body and, dealing with the social realities, right? Like of what was going on during that time period. But a lot of them are about my motherhood experience, and it's interesting for me now to look back at a lot of the poems and be able to say, oh, I'm not there anymore. And that's good. And it's interesting. And it feels nice to have that record of this was my experience with a young child and this is how it's changing.
Yes. It's almost like a journal of where you were at that time. And so when you do reflect back on it, it's interesting. So you'll see some of the poems and be like, oh, I remember writing that one. And I remember how I like kind of having that come back to you.
Yes, absolutely. Like, and I think that that's what my social media presence is about as well, right? Like it is a chronicle of my motherhood journey, and things have really shifted over the past, say, year or so, because I am not mired in the same kind of sadness and despair and all the other things that I was experiencing as a mother of a young child.
Absolutely. Yeah. And that's so beautiful. I love that. I like that idea too. I often encourage people, to consider writing things down if it's a mood tracker or a gratitude journal. When I talk to clients, and it can be very helpful to be able to write it down, get it out can be very helpful. And then also being able to reflect back on and seeing the journey that's been and the progress that's made. And but yeah, absolutely. That's so exciting. Yes. So I wanted to talk about a post from just a couple of weeks ago that you said it's not enough to say you're a priority in your life. You have to act as if you are. And I love having this conversation with people. How do we go from intention to action on that? Because yes, you are it is your life. It is a priority. And if I could be tangential before I have you answer the question that I just asked and then cut myself off. I want to acknowledge that with motherhood, especially, yes, we have this space where it's like you decide to have children and you have made this choice and therefore you put yourself on the back burner. And that seems to be the expectation. And then that we just kind of participate in that system as well. So with that in mind, how do we recognize the idea that yes, we do need to focus on ourselves. How do we get to the intention? How do we get to the action? Sorry, I apologize for cutting myself off.
No, I think that that's perfect. I work with women, right, in my business, and this is sort of a fundamental question because self-sacrificial motherhood is so deeply ingrained in all of us.
Yes.
as well as sort of sociocultural norms, right? So it's everything from the question of, oh, you're going back to work that quickly, to are you breastfeeding, to are you, you know, why is your partner staying home when your child is sick instead of you, right? Like it's really
Yes.
sort of deeply ingrained in our culture.
Mm-hmm.
And so my train totally derailed. I was like, I was going somewhere. So yes, the self-sacrificial mother.
Mm-hmm.
And so I talk to women about this all of the time, and then I find I find myself even falling into that trap, right? So recently I made a commitment to myself, and this is something that I'm going to argue women don't often do,
Uh-huh.
right? We think to ourselves, we need fixing, we need changing, we need, right? And that becomes really intense, I think, in the postpartum period, right? Because we
Yes.
have to bounce back, we have to, we still have to have an identity while also being, servants to our children, right? Like it's messed up.
Mm-hmm.
And so I made this commitment to myself to walk every day.
Yes.
And it was just this like profound revelation, right? Like, and I know walking every day is not like a big deal, but it is a big deal.
It is though.
And because it really centers me and it really prioritizes me, and it really allows me to say, like, nobody's dying while I go for my walk. Like everything's fine, you
Yes.
know? And sort of really putting a mirror up to how am I participating in my taking a back seat, right?
Yeah.
And so how can I shift that energy? How can I just say, like, this is not a problem. I am not a problem for having needs and wants that are entirely legitimate, right? And
Yes.
so that's a lot of the work that I do with women. It's really about, can we even identify what you need?
Yeah.
And then how are we going to dismantle the barriers to you getting what you need?
Yes. And what are some of the biggest barrier, or I shouldn't say the biggest, but the most common barriers that you're recognizing that people have?
You know, what's funny is it's often partners.
Okay. Yeah.
So it's often partners in heterosexual arrangements, right? Who are just not doing their fair share.
Yes. Okay.
And so they're not cooking, they're not cleaning, they're not the primary
The default caregiver is how I like.
the default, yes, the default caregiver. They are just sort of like, they just exist, they go to work, they just don't participate. And so when someone is not participating, you do not feel like you have permission, right? Like,
Yes.
I think women, we often operate in these interpersonal situations in a way that says, like, if I deserved it, he would give me the time,
Oh, yes, sure. That
right?
natural assumption. We internalize, like, I'm not happy where things are, and so therefore, if I were better, if I were more, somebody would be willing to. Interesting. Yeah.
Instead of, I have the ability to give myself permission.
Indeed.
Yeah.
Yeah. Wow, absolutely. And yeah, so that's been something that you've noticed. That's been something that I've noticed a lot too. I do work with a lot of straight, cis, heterosexual, usually women, and I've noticed that a lot historically. Yes, that it kind of seems that the partner is in some way carrying on with life as it was before child in many ways. But it's also interesting too. I don't want to go off on a tangent, but I was just talking with my class this week. I teach over at the University of Kansas, a clinical practice course at the Graduate School of Social Work, social welfare. Anyway, and we were talking about, like, do you believe everyone is doing the best they can? And I had some really varied answers, some very quick no's, some very quick yeses, some hemming and hawing in the middle. And I do wonder, and I think that is the more communication, the point of where I'm going is having those communication skills and feeling like you are worthy of having this discussion of, perhaps the partner really does think that they're doing the best that they can. That doesn't give them an excuse to not make changes. Like, it's sitting with that dichotomy of, yes, this is one thing, and also change can happen. Does your partner believe they're doing the best they can? If that answer is yes, how can you all have a solution-focused conversation about what can help each other and how? And if they know they're not doing the best they can, well, that's obviously certainly a different conversation as well, but still being able to ask to have your boundaries respected, or to have, like you said, the time to go take a walk for yourself every day, and feeling, but again, it comes from that internal value of, am I worthy of asking for something? And a lot of times the answer is no in some way, and getting to that space. Absolutely.
Right. It's about, I mean, I think it's fundamentally about how we value ourselves. Do you know what I'm saying? And
I couldn't agree more.
and
Yeah.
it's really complicated by the external sort of messages that we get, right? Because women are not fundamentally valuable, right? We're valuable in particular roles because those particular roles facilitate capitalist society, right?
That's it. That's it.
And so we are the ones that have to muddle through, right? The mom guilt, the bullshit shame, the bullshit, you know, sometimes partner antics, whatever, right? To just
Yes.
be like, guess what? This is just, I'm making these decisions.
Yes.
Right. And I'm not trying to individualize, because going back to our conversation about individual and collective action, like, both are important. And I am definitely not trying to put it on women in terms of like, you're
Yes.
the problem. What I'm trying to say is like, we can do things differently.
Yes.
And I actually challenge women to do things differently and see what happens.
Mm-hmm.
Because often that will create a mood and a life shift
Yes.
that they are not anticipating, right? Like a kind of freedom, a kind of liberation, a kind of empowerment, right? That comes with resisting what we're being told.
Yes. Yes, it is. I just want to validate again, everyone who's listening, like, okay, easier said than done. Like, it is so difficult I can't tell you how many times I've had my eyes opened recently through reading for the class that I teach, or listening to podcasts, or I don't want to say that I read too many books, because I mostly read for my class that I teach, but some of the things, the articles that I've read about having my eyes open to some of the, again, the systemic situations that have me thinking, oh, I'm supposed to be doing this. And it's like, but why? Like, why? And I apologize to Victoria's Secret, because I mention them a lot on this show, and for better or worse, whatever. But I went to college in the aughts, and that was peak Victoria's Secret angel runway. This is what your body should look like. And if not, you need to make apologies for it and fix it. And what are you doing wrong if you don't look like this? And so that's been a journey for myself individually, especially postpartum, as my body does not look the same as it did in 2018 before I got pregnant. And for the first, well, I shouldn't say pregnant for the first time. I had some pregnancy losses, but anyway, with my son. But so it's interesting to think about that. And I have this conversation of people coming back. You mentioned earlier, and I wrote it down, bounce back. I wish we could get rid of that expression and tell, like, oh, even if it's a positive, like meant to be a compliment, like, look at you, you bounced back so quickly. Like, don't comment on my body. And even if, so what if I did? So what if I didn't? But there's this expectation that we're supposed to create these children to move forward the capitalist agenda, and then we're supposed to go right back to exactly how we were before, and don't make any complaints, and how dare you have love handles or a C-section overhang, or your boobs are saggy, or whatever it might be. And so, yeah, that's another one I definitely want to look more into, about like the body piece of things as well in the postpartum experience and the pregnancy experience. But just one domino after another continues to fall in my mind of like, oh, I'm participating in a system. Oh, I thought that, but I don't think that. You've told me to think that, but I've heard it so long that I don't realize it's not from within.
Yeah, and that's one of the things, right? Like, I appreciate you talking about your class. I also teach a class in human sexuality, and that's really what we think through, right? Every week, this critical thinking piece, which is like, why? Who benefits from this, right? And you talking about sort of bounce back culture and what it's supposed to look like, who does that benefit? It benefits men, right? It benefits the male gaze. It benefits, right? Like heteronormativity, heteropatriarchy. Like it has nothing to do with us. It has nothing to do with centering women. It has nothing to do with centering children, for that matter, right? Like it has to do with like that 15-year-old boy gaze that our culture is characterized by, right? Are you desirable enough for that box? Are you fuckable? Are you a MILF? Are you all this kind of stuff, right?
Yes.
And all of that stuff takes up way too much real estate in women's heads and in women's lives, right?
Yes.
When we have so much more important things to be doing and to be thinking about and to be frankly resisting.
Yes. Yes. I think the theme of this one is resistance today. What are we, and it is recognizing the things that we're doing, that we are participating in unconsciously, subconsciously. The MILF thing, by the way, when you said that, I had such a reaction just then. Like, I can take a joke. Comedy is amazing. I prefer comedy. I don't like a lot of extra cortisol in my life in the evenings after I've spent a day dealing with other people's stressors. So I can't, it's not that I can't take a joke, but like, my brain went off on a tangent then of like, where did that even come from? Because that now is another goal, aspirational thing that we as women are supposed to attain, is go from being the fuckable 18-year-old whatever college co-ed to becoming the mom. But you got to go right back to fuckable, get right back there. And MILF, that I hadn't even thought about that until you just said that in this context of this conversation. But there's one more thing.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness, that is so fascinating. Well, I wanted to go on to, I hope you don't mind me digging through the annals of your Instagram, but I just had a couple that I thought were really great. And one of them was when you were talking about around Christmas time or the winter holidays. You posted on December 24th, was non-material gifts I give my daughter year round. And I don't know if, is it weird if I read those off, or?
Oh no, please.
So people are like, okay, I could just go to her Instagram post. Yes, it's from December 24th. But encouragement to be unapologetically herself, openness and honesty, unconditional love, permission in quotes to love anyone she wants to love, support in her interests, kindness, and a stable, healthy mom and family. And I just was like, can we all get that printed out in our houses? Can we get it in a tattoo form? I don't know. Put it on a shirt. Yeah. What were some of the things when you were kind of going through and creating that graphic that those were the ones that were like, these are the most important ones that I feel for me?
Well, I think going back to our sort of our earlier conversation, like in terms of what my experience postpartum was, right? I had this experience where I had to center myself, right? So the one thing that I didn't anticipate was that I would be consumed with like feelings of responsibility and worry over keeping a little human alive, right?
Yes.
Like that was not on my radar, right? And especially when I was trying to do it with my body, I found that so excruciating.
Yes.
Do you know what I'm saying? Because I was just like, oh my God, the responsibility of this is just crushing, right?
Yes.
And so there was that piece. But then there was like, oh shit, I also have to keep myself alive, right? And when you throw clinical depression into the mix of that, right? Those crushing forces.
Yes.
You realize like, if I'm not okay, nobody's okay. Right. And this is why I tell women all of the time, like, you are the center of your household.
Yes.
You are the center. You are the thing that makes things hold and run and all of that kind of thing. And I don't say that to put pressure on women because they have enough pressure. Right. I say it because I want to emphasize that their health and wellness is crucial to everyone's happiness.
Yes.
Right. And so that doesn't mean that we should be serving everybody else. It means that we should be serving ourselves.
Yes. Yes. I mean, the cliche, you can't pour from an empty cup.
Yes. Yes.
It's right. All of that. Yeah. And so, and I think that's the thing, is that we burn the candle at both ends. We operate on fumes because we're supposed to be sacrificing, because that's the role of a mother. And instead being able to turn and say, I really wish that we could clinically or something come up with a new word for selfish. Like there's the selfish of like, I like yacht rock and I'm going to make you listen to it whether or not you do. That's a bad selfish, although who doesn't love yacht rock? I'm kidding.
I have
And
no idea what you're talking about.
what? Oh my gosh.
You're going to have to send me some. I don't know.
I'm gonna like the literal, oh my gosh. Okay, I will send you some, because yeah, it's so funny. I had a guest on a couple weeks ago who doesn't know anything about RuPaul's Drag Race, and I was like, how much time do I want to talk about RuPaul's Drag Race on this conversation? I want to, but I will abstain. But yes, anyway, I will be sending you some playlists.
Awesome.
Songs, the music that you don't like in general, disco, right? If you hate disco and I make you listen to it on a car trip, that's a bad selfish. But a selfish of going and taking a walk, a selfish of I need to sit by myself for a couple of minutes, and it doesn't need to even be something productive. It can just literally be taking that time for myself. I wish that we could come up with a different word for that selfish, because it still smacks of the how dare you, you're supposed to be taking care of somebody right now moment. And being able to show, I think that's so beautiful too, to be able to show our children what honest self-care looks like, not just getting my nails done, although obviously I do that, but that's something that I do for myself, but that's superficial. Really taking that time for yourself, really making sure that you're finding yourself centered and taking that space up is a beautiful thing for our children to be able to observe as we try to figure out where we are as our own selves, and they can watch that process themselves. I think that's a beautiful, a stable and healthy mom is a very important thing for somebody to witness.
Yeah. And I just want to say that, like, most of my clients that worry about being selfish, like, I tell them, and this is kind of a fundamental belief of mine, I don't really believe that selfish exists.
Go ahead. Go ahead. Yes. Tell me more.
Because it just really, like, when women describe what they think selfish is, I'm just sort of like, that sounds like you're trying to fulfill a need, right?
Yes, yes. Oh, how dare you? You needed to go poop and you wanted to do it by yourself? Oh, so terrible. Yeah.
And I mean, I see a lot of women who are incredibly resentful of their families because they aren't selfish, right?
Yes.
And so I'm really a big believer, like, selfish doesn't exist. It's not helpful. It's not a helpful concept. And if we are going to use selfish, then please be audaciously selfish. Please just be in your face, super selfish, whatever that means to you, right?
Yes.
Because probably what you're talking about is an hour to yourself, right? Like, we're not talking about being a dick. We're talking about being a human with needs.
Yes. Yes. Oh my gosh. And I love that. I haven't thought about, I've had this conversation about two different words for selfish before, but I've never actually thought about just dismantling it entirely. I love that. That's such a great point. And I like the idea too, by being audaciously selfish. Like, yes, take a whole hour to yourself to do nothing or something or whatever it might be.
Watch RuPaul.
I love RuPaul's Drag Race so much.
Me too. It's a problem.
I'm so obsessed. I could sit here like I want to talk to you about season 15, but I won't. Also, Canada's Drag Race. Yes, love. Yes. Priyanka is gold. But yeah, so that, I think that's just, it's such a great idea, getting away from labeling things and just being a human, right? And I think it goes back again to that communication piece with your partner of saying, like, I'm not feeling whole, I'm not feeling centered, I'm not feeling grounded, and thinking, like, what might it be to help me to get back to that space for yourself, and then being able to express that in a way that's meaningful. And again, I like that we're making sure that we comment. Like, it's tough because a lot of this puts the pressure back on you, like when they say ask for help, and it's like, okay, first of all, to whom am I asking for this help? Everyone else is wildly busy themselves. But also, like, making sure you're finding a way of taking care of yourself puts a lot of that pressure on yourself to start the conversations. And wouldn't it be nice if people could come to you, but also, I don't know. I don't really even know where I'm trying to go with that. Just acknowledging, like, we're asking you to do more things in order to maybe feel like you're doing less things, but starting that conversation and communicating. I don't know. I think, again, coming back to the social media aspect of the bullshit of the perfectly curated Pinterest mom, and being able to say, like, no, this is hard. I don't know what I'm doing all the time. And that's okay too. And it's nice to be able to have the spaces like what you've created to be able to say, like, hey, oh, she doesn't get that either. Oh, okay. It's not just me.
Yeah. I also think I just want to challenge this idea of conversation for a second.
Please. Yes, please.
I don't know
everything. Please.
I don't know. I just don't know if this is like, I don't know if this is a helpful direction. I guess this is a bit of a tangent for me, but
I love a tangent, clearly.
I just don't think that, so like I said, I see a lot of women who are just angry, right?
Yes. That builds.
Yes, they're angry at their partners, they're angry at their children, they're frustrated, whatever.
Yes.
I don't necessarily think, and maybe this isn't the most healthy, but I don't necessarily think these women need to go to their partners and say, this is what I need. This is what I'm going to do differently. This is what just fucking do it.
I don't disagree with that.
Yeah. Like, I just mean, like, what I have realized is in the heterosexual scenario, men are not always going to understand what it means. No, let me change that. Men don't understand what it means to be a mother. They don't understand what it means to be a woman. They don't understand the pressures, right? Yes. That women experience, right? Yes. And a lot of them, as you pointed out, are, let's say, willfully ignorant.
There it is.
Of what women do. Right? And what they juggle and how they handle things and how they're working usually 3 times harder than men. Let's just put it frankly. And so I don't know that it's necessarily like, I need you to understand my needs.
I'm just going to do them.
It's more a assertion and a assurance within oneself. I have needs. They're fine. And I'm going to meet them.
Yes. I love that. I think it's very an individualized thing. So if you have open communication with your partner and you feel like they might be able, then certainly having the conversation, yes. And I also very much encourage and love that of, like, I'm going to take care of myself and I'm going to go do that. And here's what that looks like. I love that. I love being educated. I love thinking about things in a different way, right? Yeah. And for you, especially in your experience, you've seen people try to have the conversation. They try to explain. They try to and it's not even necessarily about getting the person to understand, because I'm going to fucking do it anyway, but at least getting into, maybe having the conversation. But your experience has been like, bye, there's the door. I'll see y'all later. Just do it.
Yeah. And also learning to, I think the biggest thing in that scenario that's difficult for women is learning to tolerate other people's disappointment.
Man, we could do a whole other hour on that.
Yes, we could. And so your partner gives you the silent treatment. Okay, you go for it, buddy, right? Like, your children cry and ask you to stay.
Yeah. Okay.
You're going to be fine. I'm going to leave this house and you are going to be playing with your toys within 2 minutes. So we're going to be fine. Yeah.
Yes, absolutely. And your own disappointment, because it's hard to walk out the door sometimes when they're crying. Now, I got to tell you, it's a mixed bag for me. Sometimes I'm like, no, I'm really excited about this event I'm going to, and I know you're going to be fine playing with your toys in 2 minutes. So bye. And then sometimes it's like, do I stay? No, you don't stay. Get your butt out the door. Yes. I like it.
Sorry. And thankfully, I think that gets a bit easier as they get older, right?
Yes. Yeah. It's much easier to leave a crying 3-year-old than a crying 3-month-old, I would say.
Yeah.
I would put that out there. Yes, for sure. But I like that, learning to tolerate people's disappointment, because again, it goes all back to the root of the mother. It's like our natural inclination is to fix. Our natural inclination is to set up for success so nothing needs to be fixed, so that everyone is happy and everyone is fed and everyone is nourished and everyone has the Montessori toys and the blah, blah, blah. And how do we kind of divorce ourselves from pieces of that? Obviously, the fed part, please feed your children. But some of the other things about it's okay. Perfection is not attainable. It doesn't need to be the goal. We're all doing the best we can. And sometimes people are going to not be happy with your choices. And sounds like a you problem now.
Yeah. But I mean, like, I think that there's value in embracing sort of like the bad mother. Do you know what I mean? It's like,
yes!
okay, you think I'm a bad mother? That's cool. Because I know that I am doing my goddamn best, and I don't have to prove that to anyone. I define my motherhood. You get to define yours.
Yes.
And ideally, we don't judge each other about it. But if you do, that is a you problem.
And that is a you problem, non-judgmentally, right? Walking through life in an open and non-judgmental space, which is difficult. I literally end my podcast with "be curious, not judgmental" every single time, and I have found that that's helped me in my own space in many places where I recognize an automatic thought of judgment, and then I'll be like, okay, but what if I were to be curious about that? And it's a practice that I've been putting into, and I definitely think it helps us in terms of our interactions with fellow mothers and fellow parents, for sure. Well, wow, what an amazing conversation. I cannot thank you enough for being here. What a beautiful thing. Where can our team find you? I know we already talked about Instagram, but where can everybody find you?
So you can find me at Eating Her Young or at Empowerment for Resilience. So one is my business page, one is my sort of social media presence. I also have a website for my business, www.empowermentforresilience.com. You can join Mommy Voices on Facebook. It's a very supportive, non-judgmental, compassionate space for moms. And just find me and we'll chat, because you're absolutely not alone.
Yes. And also buy her book.
Please. Yes.
Eating Your Young, Poems for the Disruption of Motherhood. Go find her book. I assume wherever books are purchased.
It is the easiest on Amazon. Just go and get it off of Amazon. That's the easiest.
Amazon. Perfect. I love it. Well, thank you again. I can't thank you enough. What a pleasure it has been. And for the team out there, be curious, not judgmental. See y'all.